This week, the Democrats started flexing their new muscle. They have control of the U.S. House of Representatives, which means they now have the power to investigate Donald Trump on their own terms. The media are salivating at the potential headlines. Us too.
We're going to begin with a historic power shift in Washington. Democrats taking over the House.
The president now faces a whole new world for him.
Can our country stay on that track, given the changes of power that we watched unfold today?
Republicans still hold the Senate, but are they staying true to Trump? As his approval ratings slump, cracks are appearing. Take Mitt Romney. This week, he wrote a scathing op-ed in the Washington Post criticizing Trump. The Democrats have been planning how to take down Trump for months. Adam Schiff, he's the new chair of the House Intelligence Committee. It's a big deal. And he wants to know more about the president's ties to Russia, and he's going to call witnesses. First on his list is Trump's former personal attorney.
Certainly like Michael Cohen to come in very soon. He clearly has a lot to say. In the special counsel's pleadings, it was clear that he had information that was of core interest to the special counsel.
Also on his to-do list, Donald Trump Jr. Did John Jr. call his father before that meeting with Russians at the Trump Tower to try and get some dirt on Hillary Clinton? We know he called someone, but the number was blocked. Schiff plans to subpoena telephone records, and if it turns out that Don Jr. did call his dad, that could prove that Trump colluded with Russia to win the election, and that would be reason to impeach. The new House Speaker isn't ruling out indictment or impeachment.
Well, we have to wait and see what happens with the Mueller report. We shouldn't be impeaching for a political reason, and we shouldn't avoid impeachment for a political reason. So we'll just have to see how it comes.
Some Democrats were a little less subtle, especially Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
People love you, and you win. Woo! And when your son looks at you and says, "Mama, look, you won," bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't, because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach them.
Yeah, Trump called Tlaib a disgrace and said he's not going anywhere.
Well, you can't impeach somebody that's doing a great job. That's the way I view it. I've probably done more in the first 2 years than any president, any administration in the history of our country.
What does it take to impeach an American president? Treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Only 2 presidents have ever been impeached, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, but both were acquitted in the Senate. Then there's Richard Nixon. If the Democrats want to take down a sitting president, Nixon left them a playbook.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Richard Nixon is the only U.S. president to ever resign, and it happened for 3 key reasons. Here's why Trump could be next. Accusations of obstruction of justice. For Nixon, it started with what is called the Saturday Night Massacre, when in 1973, he fired Archibald Cox, who was leading the investigation into Nixon's involvement with Watergate. Trump was accused of obstruction when he fired James Comey over his investigation of alleged crimes during Trump's election campaign. Similarity 2, lawyers with taped evidence. Nixon's nemesis was White House counsel John Dean, who revealed there were tapes from the Oval Office proving Nixon was prepared to pay $1 million to silence the Watergate burglars. And Trump, well, his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, is not only talking to Robert Mueller, he has tapes of private conversations with Trump that reportedly suggest Trump directed the payoff to keep Stormy Daniels quiet. Similarity 3, subpoenas from Congress. Mueller's not done his investigation into Trump, but once he is, Democrats say they will subpoena Mueller's report if Trump tries to invoke executive privilege to keep it secret. That's exactly what happened to Richard Nixon when the House Judiciary Committee issued a subpoena demanding the special prosecutor deliver the goods that he had on Nixon. And he had a lot, accusing Nixon of everything from obstruction of justice to considering clemency for his supporters. Sound at all familiar?
Our obligation and our duty is to impeach.
Impeach. Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeach. Impeach.
Impeach the President of the United States.
Before Nixon could be impeached, he resigned.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Here to talk about all this is former Watergate prosecutor Jill Wine-Banks. She's in Chicago. So, Jill, welcome back. A few flashbacks here. What do you think? I mean, is Trump going to resign like Nixon did? What's coming? Quick prediction.
Quick predictions are impossible, but it does not seem to be in his personal nature to ever quit, to recognize the reality. I'm hoping that eventually Republicans in Congress will see the truth, will see the facts, and will see how it's going to hurt them, and will, like the Republicans in Congress during the Nixon administration, will go to him and say, you need to resign. So maybe that will happen. I think the facts need to come out first.
It is very early days. We don't know quite what Mueller has in his case, but from what you're hearing, it's a pretty high bar to impeach a president. We've heard about subpoenaing the tax records, maybe looking at the issue of money laundering, subpoenaing the phone number. Where did Don Jr. call? Who did he call that night? What are you looking for? What is the most important piece of evidence that you'll be watching for?
I think there are two different ways to approach this. One is his fitness in general to serve, the fact that he does not read history and know history, that he doesn't understand the impact of things like the U.S. government shutdown, which is hurting at least 800,000 employees of the federal government. And the other is whether he has committed crimes, whether they be obstruction of justice, which I think there's plenty of evidence to support right now, even with just what we know without knowing Mueller's investigation. But also his relationship with Russia, which whether he colluded, as the American public is calling the conspiracy, with the Russians to interfere with the election, he has certainly adopted too many Russian policies and supported them, and other foreign governments, the Saudi government, for example, where it is not in America's interest. So they may be crimes that he has committed. You've mentioned tax records. There are probably tax crimes, and we'll get to the bottom of it. Once the facts come out, there may be crimes. I believe the Constitution does not restrict us from indicting a sitting president. So in addition to impeachment, there is the possibility of indictment, but both are fact dependent, and we need to know enough about the facts because you need extra special strong facts to go against the president.
I'm going to bring in Dahlia Lithwick now. She has been covering the Mueller investigation for Slate magazine. A quick prediction from you, Dahlia. What do you think? What are you looking for, and where do you think this is heading? Is there an impeachment, a resignation in the future?
Wendy, I think that Jill is exactly right, that this is almost a political calculation more than a legal one. And for me, it turns on the Senate. I think that getting 67 votes in the current Senate is unfathomable. I think the person to watch is Mitch McConnell. When Mitch McConnell decides it's time to cut Donald Trump loose, he will be able to procure 67 votes. Until then, I think that Jill's exactly right. We have a slow rolling unfurling of information between the Mueller probe, between various federal suits, between the state lawsuits. So we have the public slowly understanding that there has been massive wrongdoing and massive unfitness. But really, until the Senate is willing to make the concession that what they say in secret, we know this is a problem, is what they're going to say out loud, we're quite a ways from there.
The new Senator, Dahlia, Mitt Romney this past week made an attack on Trump, but he didn't get a lot of support. So, I mean, at what point do Republican senators, in particular, they control the Senate, feel that it's time to abandon Trump? Like Jill saw, it took Republicans with Nixon until almost the very end. Dahlia?
The Senate stuck with Nixon for a long time, and I think you're going to see the same thing. You see things like Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, senators who will say they're appalled and then continue to vote with Trump's programs. I think this week we saw some interesting peeling off from Susan Collins of Maine, Cory Gardner from Colorado saying they're not going to support the shutdown. So you want to watch for those fault lines where senators both peel off and then really put some muscle behind it. It's happening drip, drip, drip. It's going to have to happen in massive, massive iteration before we can even talk about 67 senators.
So, Jill, I hadn't realized until this week, really, that when the Mueller investigation is complete and he submits it, that there's a possibility that we won't that it'll be heavily redacted, as so much of it has been. So, Jill, how serious is this idea that the House could subpoena or have to subpoena the Mueller report, that's how we'll see it?
I think what's important is for the House to start using its subpoena power and to have public hearings, because it's not enough to see a report. What you need to see is the body language and the tone of voice of witnesses. That's how the American people will understand what's going on. And in Watergate, it really took a public outcry to change the view of the Congress. That's what really made a difference. The Saturday Night Massacre was a pivotal moment. There was outrage among the American public universally. It was not a partisan issue. It was clearly all Americans felt outraged by the behavior, and they let their congressmen know it. Senators and representatives then started seeing that there was some support for taking action against the president. And that's, I think, what really led to it. So we need public education so that people who are now supporting Trump and those who aren't know the evidence. We need to have the facts, and the only way to get the facts in a relatable way is for public hearings.
So, Delia, I mean, can Donald Trump stop this? He was able to protect himself somewhat from the investigative efforts so far when he was in control of the entire Congress. He's not as well armed now, is he? Can he stop these subpoenas, these hearings that the Democrats are planning?
Well, I think he will certainly, if he is subpoenaed, he will mount a challenge, and we'll see what happens. I think one of the reasons that Jeff Sessions is gone and Matt Whitaker is in is because the person who controls the Justice Department controls the Mueller probe, and that means that he's trying to shut the whole thing down. But even if he, I think at this point, tries to defy Adam Schiff, the Intelligence Committee, the other committees in Congress, remember, there is enough that has been farmed out to state attorney generals around the country. There is enough that has been farmed out in federal lawsuits around the country. This is a little bit like whack-a-mole. Shutting down committee hearings in the Congress does not shut down the entirety of this probe. I think Bob Mueller was very, very smart to really diversify who is investigating right now.
One last question for you, Delia. Jill's saying that she doesn't think Trump is the kind of guy who will resign. Would he not even consider cutting a deal, perhaps, with Mueller, just even to save his family?
I think when Donald Trump's actual family, when Don Jr. and Jared, if it happens, are really within the crosshairs, we may see Donald Trump say, I can't pardon myself, or alternatively, nobody can be pardoned for state crimes. It's just the cost of sticking around is too high. I think that's the best template, is if it just becomes intolerable for him to continue, if he thinks he's that exposed. But I agree with Jill, up until that instant, he's going to stick around because his nature is deny, deny, deflect, deflect.
So much to watch for here. Thank you so much to both of you. Jill Wine-Banks in Chicago and Delia Lithwick in New York. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.